One of the things I think we need to work with young men and boys more on is cultivating listening heart postures. Let me explain what I mean by this, okay? Listening heart postures for me is one of the most important aspects of developing accountable human beings, but in the context of this podcast format, accountable masculinities. And I try and instill this in the young men and masculinities that I work with as young as I can in the school spaces that I work with. And I'm talking about listening postures here, listening heart postures to be specific, because I feel like often when we talk to and look at the conditioning around men and masculinities, whether we name it or whether we explore it, whether we make space and room for it, whether we dig in the soil of our own conditioning, often we are used to saying what we think and what we feel. And we have in many ways normalized interruption, normalized, yeah, but no, what I meant is, or speaking over people or trying to explain someone's experience because we feel like we've got an understanding of it, right? Or feeling like it's our right to butt in if we feel like we've got the answer. Like these interruption based behaviors, this cutting in behavior, this entitlement complex that we often have that we don't name because it's uncomfortable and it's an uncomfortable mirror and it often creates a dysregulated response. And that's not who I am. That's not what I'm trying to do. You're X, Y, and Z in me in this space. Insert whatever that sort of reaction is and whatever that reaction feels like to that young person or masculinity in general. We're used to being able to say what we feel and bring it into the conversations that we're a part of. And we often see this in conversations around misogyny, sexism, violence against women and girls, or just the experience of women and gender plural people across the spaces that we exist within and across the dialogues that we're having. And for me, crafting and cultivating listening heart postures is hugely important for creating space for ideas to land and for ideas to be processed. Because when we're talking about creating space for young men, young masculinities to evolve, to think about different ideas and perspectives, we can't do that without cultivating listening heart postures or opening our ears more, for lack of a better term. Leading with our ears instead of our mouths is another way of framing it, right? And there's something about naming that, but also something about modeling that for me is massively important. One of the things that young people often share with me when they work with me over the course of a few weeks, whether that's a couple of sessions or a session that we spend exploring ideas of masculinity, one of the things that they often share on feedback is that you listen to us in the space. And I've shared this across different episodes before, but you listen to us. You don't cut in, you don't tell us that it's wrong. You listen, you let us finish, and then you offer your ideas and your perspectives. That might seem really simplistic and obvious to a large amount of you listening to these episodes and being like, well, of course, that's just human conversation interaction, right? But again, when we talk about masculinity, I've got no problem or no issue surfacing that younger versions of me felt like if you're not getting to the point fast enough, or if I disagree with you, I can just jump in and tell you how I feel. There wasn't a thought process of let's let this person finish and think and untangle what they need to say. Let's give them the space and the time to articulate what they feel. Let me not lead in with my assumptions and let me just curiously explore my own responses to that. Let me just listen and take it in before I decide what to do with it, decide what to say, how to say it. It seems really obvious, but again, if you look to some of the cultures that we're part of and also just observe young people in general, there is a culture of button in specifically that I see with young men and boys that before we even say, yeah, it's just the way we're raised. No. Boys aren't just boys, it's not boys being boys. It's who we've allowed boys to be in the context of interpersonal conversations and communication contexts. To be blunt, to be to the point, that's what that is. We haven't challenged that enough. We haven't created space to say, hold on, let this person fit. Why are you moving in for? Why are you jumping in for? Give them time to chill. Like, come on, just let them process. Or modeling that listening with the desire to listen, not the desire to butt in and jump in. Now, something that young men, in my context, observe and name quite frequently. You listen to us, you let us explore, you let us land and sort of work out where we're going. My response to that in many of these spaces is, how can you do that for someone else after this today then? How can you put what you just experienced into practice? Because if we're looking to create cultures of emotional attunement, openness to ideas, openness to reflection, openness to accountability. We've got to model what we seek. We've got to model a listening posture. We've got to lead with our ears and not just our mouths. That has to be seen, because at times, as sad as it is to say, sometimes that isn't the model that's seen or normalized. And we need to make space and room for that to be normalized. So creating space for listening with the intention to listen is massively important when it comes to creating cultures of accountability, but also creating the reflective spaces that are necessary for young men to explore their own ideas, but also listen to the experiences of others. Listen with the intent to begin to understand, as opposed to listen just so that you can rattle off the point that you've stored in your mind that you want to just let out of the chamber and just let it land, and that's what it is. This takes practice, it takes consistency, but it also takes a modeling. And I think often when we're talking about the work that happens in spaces and places with young men and masculinities, we kind of sometimes forget the practicality of modeling what we seek. We could talk about concepts all day long. We could talk about the systemicness all day long. Massively important, by the way. I'm not saying we don't talk about these things, but there's something practically about being able to demonstrate what this process of reflecting, learning, unlearning looks like. And in some spaces, the simplest form of that is demonstrating that you can listen with the intent to listen. And this isn't me sending shots at men and boys and saying, y'all just need to listen more because you're out here just butting in all the time. If that lands for you in a way that's like, maybe that is me, that's something to think about. But hey, listen, I've been there too, right? I've been in that space. I've been in that heart posture and mind posture where I haven't acknowledged my own internalized, unnamed superiority complex. I know what this is about. I know what this person's feeling. One of the things that, one of the things for me that I always used to say, which I talk about a lot in terms of the difference between intention versus experience. The thing that I used to do a lot when people used to come to me with their experiences, specifically, guys, but also when peers were speaking about their experiences, what it was like to be a young woman at the time and these type of things, I would come in with the sense of, that's not what it's like though. Because I know what I'm like in that space, and that's not what that's like. I know what I'm like, so men and boys can't be like that. Or that's not how you feel. How you really feel is X, Y, and Z. And it would come across like I was speaking from a position of wisdom, but the older me, the one that reflects back and watches back the tape of these interactions, I just want to throw my head like out into the vacuum of space and just let my head just ring off for a bit, but screaming, why? Why? It comes with practice and it also comes with acknowledgement, but it doesn't mean that we can't have the conversations earlier with young people. Because like I said, that might resonate with some of you listening to this right now. I do actually tell people what they feel more than I listen to how they're actually feeling. And that is something I need to work on. That is something I need to actually make space for. That is something I need to make conscious effort to model to the young people that I work with, that I serve. Because remember, young people don't just learn what you teach them directly in the sense of, this is what we're learning today. Or if you're a sports coach, doesn't learn this is what we're drilling today. Or this is what I'm teaching you this particular tactic or this format, whatever it is. They also learn from your character. They pick things up. They pick up things. They see things that are normalized. And they bring that in, and they might modify it to suit their context and their spaces. But young people aren't just learning in terms of what we say, they're watching what we do. They're watching how we communicate. They're watching how we listen. They're watching how we take on feedback and criticism. They're watching all of this. So for me, one of the things that I spent a lot of time unlearning and reworking was my listening heart posture. Listening with the intention to understand instead of tell somebody else what I thought they were feeling, as an example. Which is why a lot of the time when I work with young people who are dysregulated and they come in and they're really angry about something, I can't believe I'm in the session. Like, I haven't done anything wrong. Like, I haven't done anything. Like, I don't understand why I'm here in this space and why I'm here and what's going on. I feel pretty upset about it, actually. Like, do you want a roadmap, or do you just want an earpiece right now? And it's like, what are you talking about, bro? why is bro being so mystic? It's like, do you want someone to actually give you the practical elements of this is why you're here in this space right now, this is why this is going on, or do you just want someone to listen to how you're feeling? Because we can do whatever works for you in this space. That's a listening posture. Do you need a roadmap, or do you need an earpiece, or do you need a GPS, or do you just need someone to just listen to where you're coming from? Now, tell me what's going on. This type of modeling helps people in general to tap into what is needed in the moment. And when we're talking about cultivating and building those listening postures, having it modeled first is massively important because it sometimes doesn't come easily because it's been normalized, encouraged, and rewarded without us even checking in and realizing it. So that's what I wanted to talk about in this episode today. How are we crafting and cultivating listening postures? We have to model it first, but we also have to make space and room to challenge the ways in which, at times, young men, masculinities in general, are enacting unnamed entitlement. They're enacting a unacknowledged belief that what I say is more important, or what I feel is more important than what's being expressed to me right now. What I think about how this person feels is more important than how this person actually feels. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but you get what I'm saying, right? How I feel about what this person feels is more important to me, so I'm going to just step in and tell them how I feel about it. We need to train young people masculinities out of that. Intention versus experience. I may have intended, or I intend to tell it to you how it is, or give it to you straight, all of these things. Like, I'm just telling you the truth. No, you're not. What you're doing is you are sitting with your uncomfortability, and because you can't sit anymore with it, you're interrupting. You feel like it's okay for you to jump in, therefore that entitlement plays out, and now you feel like you have the right to jump in and tell someone else how they feel when they're explaining to you how they actually feel. Having that ability to name that, talk about that, and work through that is massively important. It's something that all of us as human beings, but specifically to the masculinities and people who identify as masculine, listening into these episodes, can really think about and take on board. How can we this week listen more than we talk? Is that actually actively listening into conversations, or is it just taking the time to stop typing our thoughts and our opinions and actually listen to ideas and perspectives? One of the things I asked the young people before I wrap this episode up, we're talking about what young women, for example, as an example, what young women need or how they feel. My response to that is, so did you ask them that? Did you get that information directly from them? No. Well, no, obviously, like, it's just the truth, right? It's just the way it is. But how would you know that? And if you haven't asked, yeah, but you know what it's like, man. Like, you know what it's like. So I'm like, well, no, I don't, because the conversations I've had with, in this context, women, around the experiences of being a woman, that's not adding up actually. And what I've listened to and what I've learned, that goes against what you're saying right there. When was the last time you asked your classmates what it's like to be a young woman in the context of school? When was the last time you asked your peers what it's like to be a young woman in this, current situation, context that we're in right now? When was the last time you checked in with how your behaviors and beliefs were landing to some of your women in there, young women, girls in your classroom? When was the last time you checked that? When was the last time you checked in on that? When was the last time you did that? That's actively calling in the desire to build that listening posture more than the talking, posture of like, I know what it is. I am entitled to express my ideas and opinions. How we do that, how we model that is massively important. And it's something I want to leave you with as I wrap up this episode for this week. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope there are some things for you to think about and take away into your own practice, whether that's personally, whether that's professionally, whether it's a mix or blend of both. Thank you for listening to me expressing and exploring my ideas. You've just demonstrated a listening posture, actually. Whoa, look at that. Some meta stuff happening right now. Like, you've just listened to me. Maybe you've been pausing, actually, and you've been getting notice. That's not right because, and that's not right because, but I'm hoping and I'm leaning into this idea that you've listened to me for these next, like coming up to 15 minutes right now. And, you've been cultivating that listening posture. How can we do that moving forwards for the rest of the week? And how can we build that capacity moving forwards? Thank you so much again for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. And hopefully I will see you in a future episode very, very soon. Stay well now. God bless. Bye-bye.